Happy Earth Day to everyone. And I just would like to start off by handing it over to Ms. Karuna Singh. She's the Regional Director Asia at the Earth Day Network. Ma'am, would you like to say a few words before we begin the session?
Yes, thank you very much for putting this together, especially for today, which is a commemoration of Earth Day. It is the 52nd anniversary of Earth Day. Every year there is a theme for Earth Day, and this year's theme for Earth Day is Invest in Our Planet, which I think is a theme that brings about a partnership between everyone, whether you're in business, whether you're in a corporate sector, whether you are with the government or you are just a citizen. But it is for all of citizens of Earth, not just citizens of Delhi or West Bengal or India or Asia. And that is a very important thing, that we have to all come together, join hands, and do something, in particular because we are going to hear from Professor Prakash about the need to do it now, otherwise it might be too late. So I am going to stop there, just say that this is our 52nd anniversary. We started with the first Earth Day on April 22, 1970. And today we engage with over 50,000 organizations in 190 countries to take the environmental movement forward. But nothing can be done without networking. Nothing can be done without everyone joining together, because the aim is one. The aim is for humanity to survive on Earth. So thank you very much for putting this together for us. We are privileged to work with you, and of course, our added privilege is that Professor Prakash has agreed to spend time with us today. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Ajay, who's been working with you on all this. So Ajay, why don't you come into the hot seat? Come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. Thank you everyone for putting this together. Thank you, Dr. Prakash. And very looking forward to hear your session. So over to you, sir.
So thank you so much, Karuna ma'am and Ajay. So this year, the global theme is Invest in Our Planet. And keeping that in mind, we have the 7th session of this talk series. This series of discussions is led by experts, climate scientists from a wide array of developments regularly happening in shaping the environment and climate narrative. The attempt here is to communicate such developments in a non-technical manner and also ensure engaging better understanding for all. Today, we have Dr. Anjal Prakash, who will be sharing insights from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change AR6 report pertaining to India and its climate. He will be sharing a synopsis of all 3 IPCC AR6 reports, regional implications of IPCC findings, and throwing some light on city action plans. Dr. Prakash is the Research Director and Adjunct Associate Professor at the Bharati Institute of Public Policy, Indian School of Business. He is the lead author of the chapter on city settlement and key infrastructure in the IPCC Working Group 2 of the 6th Assessment Report. Thanks for taking the time to share your insights, Dr. Prakash, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Badri and Karuna, as well as all my colleagues here. Very, very happy Earth Day to all of you. And salam, namaste, and good afternoon to all my listeners and people who are hearing us on this very auspicious day, the Earth Day. What I'm going to do today is next about 25 to 30 minutes, I will just give an outline of the major findings, and that is also for the people who do not understand the nuances of climate change. So I'll just give you a very snapshot of what are the major issues that has been highlighted by the 3 IPCC report in sequel, and what is this implication for us as Indians, and that I'll try and just for this point. Let me just go over. But before I move to the major point, I just wanted to also explain to you how IPCC work and how is IPCC organized. As you all know, it is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Is one of the highest scientific body which actually looks into periodically, it looks into where we are on climate change. So every cycle is about 6 to 7 years, 5 to 7 years. Last report has come in 2014, and this is the 6th assessment cycle. So you can understand the cycles are not defined, but it's roughly about 4 to 6 years or 7 years. This time we have taken about 7 to 8 years, but in between there were 3 special reports also that came. So this is the 6th assessment cycle, and IPCC defined into 3 different working groups. So the first working group looks into what we call the science of climate change. So it's a scientific kind of institution where we very kind of nuanced level in which we look at the science. Second is where which I was part of the working group, which is both which more on the social science aspect of climate change, looking at impacts, adaptation, and vulnerabilities. Who are the people who are vulnerable? How is it impacting? That's the second group. And the third group, which looks into what we call how do we mitigate the impact of climate change. So that's also the three groups are there. So at this moment, all the three reports are out. The first report was out last year, and the two reports have come this year, and these are all in sequel. And now there's a group which is actually working to synthesize all the reports, so that also finding will be out very soon. But here I will like to decipher some of these points or what are the things. So I'll focus on 5 major points from the reports that we have come so far. The first point is actually, I mean, it's all the reports have been confirming that climate change is occurring. So there's no duality here. Earlier, in couple of years before, if you would ask me or ask other people, they would say that not sure if this is a climate event and all that. But now the science is very clear that most of the events that we are seeing, the high rainfall event, the drought, and the things, they all are leading or heat waves at this moment of time. They all are occurring because of climate change. The question is, even if we, the discussion was that can we keep the global temperature rise to what limit to 1.5 degree by end of the century, which was the goal earlier. But depending on how we are doing now at this moment, and the reports are also telling us that we will be missing the bus as far as 1.5 degree warming is concerned. Now, why is warming, what happens, just 1 degree warming or 1.5 degree warming, that most of you will think, or the commoners think that, how does it matter? Each fraction of warming is important because it leads to a warmer climate. Warmer climates means you have, glaciers will melt, you'll have more heat waves, it will feed into active water cycle and leading to more cyclones and all this. So each fraction of warming is very important to check. It looks like that we will be reaching, and the third report, which is actually on mitigation of climate change, tells us that if we do, the way we are going at this moment, we will be not only crossing 2 degree, but we'll also cross about, we'll come toward 3 degree warming, which is almost like catastrophe when it is not going to reverse some of the things that we have done. So that's the issue, is that the window of opportunity is very short now. It looks like to us that about 1.5 decades is what we have at this moment in our hand, maximum of the 2 decades. This window is closing very fast and very soon. So we all must have to act now. And that's the first point I would like to put forward. Second is, as the reports are telling us that okay. Please mute yourself so that thank you. So second part is, which is very important, is also looking at how risk is going to magnify and adaptation actually is hitting its limit. So as you know, planetary boundaries are reaching already for some sectors, the planetary boundaries have already reached. We are actually hitting the what we call the hard limit to adaptation. That means if we next 15 years is very crucial, and if we don't do anything, then even if we want to adapt, we will not be able to adapt. And that's the whole part of it. And that's the issue, is that the hazards are going to be increasing multifold. The risk is going to be compounding. And there's another thing, what we call the compound interest risk that we have. So compounding risk is that, or we call cascading risk that we have. So cascading risk is something that, you have, for example, if you have flood, that may lead to certain, health impacts. It may lead to certain things in terms of, impacting people's lives and livelihoods. So these are the cascading impacts. So one event may lead to several other events, and they're all interlinked. So that's number one. The second is about the heat waves, drought, wildfire. All these extremes are going to be increasing, both in terms of frequency and the intensity, and which is going to go way beyond the natural variability. So nature has its own capacity to cope, but we are actually reaching that boundaries very, very fast. And that's the second point that I would like to put forward. The third point, which is very important for us to know, is that the cities are at a much greater risk, much than ever before. See, cities globally, about 55% of people stay in the cities. In India, we have about 35% of urbanization, which is going to be reaching to about 40% by 2040, 2045, based on certain projections. About 300, we are adding about 350 million. We have actually from the report says that between 2015 to 2020, we have added about 350 million people to the urban spaces globally. And a lot of this new population which come to cities, that has about 35% of this growth has happened in South Asia. That means our cities are becoming very, very, center for most of the economic activities, but it's also number of people who are going to be in our cities. An estimate says that by 2040, about 60 crore people, about 60 million people will be in the urban spaces in India. 60 crore, we will be all together, which is almost the double of the size of present day United States. So you can understand the number of people who will be living in the cities. Now, why is it important to know? Because the density of population is very high. Also, cities are becoming very risky places to live in. You look at the monsoon creating havoc, or if the coastal cities are there, issues are about cyclones are happening, floods are happening. These are the issues where most of the poor people, and then most of the time we see that about 30 to 35% people are from the lower socioeconomic conditions, and they will be impacted more. For example, air pollution in Delhi, you see floods in Mumbai. These are the things which are going to be very, very common, and then it's going to be impacting our lives very much. Just to elaborate this point further, I will show you a very interesting report that Natasha she has put it in Sunday's Time, and I had contributed to this process where she has mapped out the cities, the coastal cities, and look at the data from 2020 itself. There were 4 major cyclones in India. Why is it happening? Because, when the climate change happens, especially the global warming, ocean, apart from the trees, which actually sink in the carbon, ocean are the second, stuff which actually sinks in the carbon. That means oceans are absorbing the carbon among themselves. And because of this, they are more acidic, more warmer, and less productive. And then also they also feed into what we call the larger water cycles. When the ocean is warmer, it will feed into more and more cyclones. And if you see this, cities which are all across the coastal areas, Surat, Mumbai, Kochi, Chennai, Kolkata, these are very, very high, what we call the high major cities which are at risk. And the second level cities which are also at risk are Kandla, Okla. And you look at these cities all across the map that we have in India. So these cities are going to be much more at risk because of the frequency of cyclones are going to rise. Also the severity of cyclones which are going to rise. There's a data from IIT-TM, which is Indian School of Tropical Meteorology. They have observed that there is a 52% increase in the number of cyclones in the Arabian Sea, right? So most of the time when we see the cyclones occurs in the Bay of Bengal, but the Arabian Sea cyclones are also, there's a 52% increase in this one. And this is something that's going to be in order of the day as we go along. So cities like Mumbai are going to be Kolkata are very, very at risk, much at risk at this moment of time as we speak. The fourth point that we have is that look at the rural India, for example, the changing livelihood patterns and the environmental conditions are very, very stressed. That is leading to what we call, migration of people from the urban area, rural areas to urban areas. If you see, in rural Bihar, for example, if the flood comes, or of water comes from Nepal, half of, North Bihar is flooded. And 3 to 4 months time, they lose, and most of the people who do not have much access to land or other resources, they have to flock to the cities to survive. And men, when the men migrate, women actually are at the forefront of the economy. My own work in Bihar, in Assam, and in other parts of flood-affected regions, I've seen personally that men are almost 6 to 7 months. They leave to places like Punjab, Delhi, Haryana, as far as Kerala, Tamil Nadu. These are places that men migrate. Mumbai, definitely, out Maharashtra, for example. So when they migrate, they also live in the abysmal conditions. So when they migrate, they are in a greater risk because they're in the cities. But at the rural areas, women have to do triple shifts. Sometimes I've seen my own fieldwork shows that women get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and they sleep at 12 in the night. They are toiling every day in, day out. This entire burden of household plus the economy is on their shoulder. So this is something that is unprecedented, and this is something that we must look into through policies, the social policies, other program that we have. The fifth point is about, if you look at the map of India, on the top we have glaciers, and I'll take you through some of the issues of glacier decline or the heat wave and all that. From the top, we have the what we call the Himalayan region that is at a much greater risk because of the declining of glaciers. Also, some of the climate-led events like Chamoli disasters are going to be out of the day. This is what has been predicted. So that is the risk area that we have. Look at the coastal. I've already discussed how coastal cities and the coastal areas are at a much greater risk. The sea level rise is happening, that is intruding into the water bodies, contaminating the freshwater bodies, plus the cyclones and other things. Fisher folk people are finding that there is a less production of the fish because of the warmer ocean that we have. So these are the things. And what is left is in between what we call the semi-arid economies. About 52% of India's landmass is either semi-arid or arid regions. And that is another place where you will see more and more drought conditions. And that is, so we are not safe from any side. We are safe. We are, there's risk from the top, there's risk from the bottom, risk in the middle. And that's what the whole problem with India is, that it has most of the world's ecology, but each of them are very sensitive to climate change. And that is something that we have to really watch for. I'll show you here in terms of the Himalayan rivers that we have seen. This is the map of the Hindu Kush Himalaya. The dark green areas are where the Hindu Kush Himalaya, regions are. And if you look at the rivers, the major rivers come from this region. Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra, all these rivers originate from this region. And this is something which is very, very susceptible to climate change. There are about 210 million people who live in this area, but about 1.3 billion people are living, they are actually benefited by the water that is here, flows downstream. So as far as the middle India, including Delhi and the Calcutta and those places, this is all in what we call the Indo-Gangetic plain. And the nectar of this is what we call the Kailash Mansarovars. This place, what we is actually Kailash Mansarovar, and that's why Kailash Mansarovar is very sacred for Hindus and Buddhists, because we knew from a long time that this is something which we call the nectar, and that is because all the 10 rivers actually originate from here, from the base flow that comes out from the Kailash Mansarovar. So that is where you look at the Brahmaputra River, for example. It originates here, it travels all the way and to China, and then drains in Bangladesh, crossing India, Assam, India. Similarly, if you look at Ganges and you look at Indus, the Sindhu River in Hindi, these are things. But this is also an area which has about 54,000 glaciers, about 60,000 square kilometers of land, which is the glaciers. Now glaciers, there are only other two places that is there, the North Pole and the South Pole. This is called the third pole because this is the largest reserve of ice in the world, apart from the two polar region. That's why it's called third pole. And it's very important because this is something that is keeping the reserve for our future water is actually coming from here. And that's why this is important for us to protect. But what is climate change doing here? I'll show you. If you look at, it's okay. So second part is also about how it is feeding into groundwater. This is the world map of groundwater resource, and you will find that this entire region, which I showed you, actually is also fed by groundwater reserves. So whatever water that flows from the top also gets stored downstream in the earth and as groundwater, and that's something that is like a your fixed deposit bank account, which you can use it later. So surface water is sometime perennial, sometime you may not be using it all the time, but groundwater is something that you can store. If you have a capacity, you can store and you can use it. And that is what the surface water and the groundwater connections are there, which you could see from this map that we have. Showing you, okay, so how is this glacier melt contributing to the stream flow? And this is the, again, the map of Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And if you find the darker color, that means the Sindhu River, the Indus River, which is fed largely by the what we call the glacier melt. So when the glacier melts, it it provides a base flow, but it is also contributes to other places that you have. So this is the figure, the map which shows you how each of the rivers are actually being fed by glacier melt and the runoff that happens in the Himalayan region, right? And that's how that makes the river which flows in the plains areas. Okay. This is the map that I show you about heat map now. So we'll shift from the what has happened to the glaciers. We'll go to what is happening in the semi-arid regions. Now this is the map which has actually showed us what is the current climate. So this is the current climate, and which was taken about 2018 data. So this is about 4 to 5 years before. This is the climate that we have, which is under 4.5 RCP 4.5 scenario. And if you look at, I will just show you how this is going to be heat stress going to be increasing. So this is the by 2050, this is going to be the area. The darker color represent more areas which is under heat conditions, right? So if you look at this is at the moment, and then this is going to be by 2050, this is going to be lighter. And again, this is in scenario where we expect certain as RCP 4.5 is where we expect certain policies to change, and climate change is combated to an extent, and that's what this is going to be. But under a severe, when we don't do anything, this is the scenario which is called RCP 8.5, which is going to be a very severe heat wave, which is going to be striking the entire North India, as you see. So you see, if you focus here in this area, Bihar and other parts, this was not affected, but in RCP 4.5, it is slightly affected, and RCP 8.5, it is severely affected. This whole area is going to be, so entire North India is going to be reeling under heat wave. And as you see, as we are speaking also, couple of days before itself, heat wave has been very pronounced. In South India, there was a rain yesterday in some portions of the states, which has cooled down temperature, but still it is the heat wave is striking very fast. This is the picture of the, yes, okay. This is a picture of Himalayan glaciers, and it was taken in 2019, the same spot. The picture was taken in 2009, and I'll show you how it has changed. And this is the glacier that we have. And look at the glaciers, how it has been shrinking, it has been melting, right? I'll do it again for you so that you can see this 2019-21. This is the entire area. It was black and white, but the entire area actually has glaciers. This glaciers has melted to a very, very large extent. And this is what this picture is showing. I'll show you another picture. This is the retreating glaciers, again, the same point, and you will see how things are changing very, very fast. You know, the Himalayan mountains are becoming barren. They are actually, if you look at the glaciers are retreating at a very, very fast rate. That is because the global warming. And in the Himalayan region, what we call is the elevation dependent warming. As you go up in the mountain, the warming impacts are much higher. So in the ground level, if it's 2 degrees centigrade warming, it may be 3 to 4 degrees centigrade on the top Himalayan region. That's why it's melting very fast. You know, the Chamoli disaster, which has happened because of this changes in the climate, right? Let me come to the point about India's pledge that has happened at COP26, and this is where we talked about net zero. And I'll try and decipher this for you. There were 5 points that the PM Modi talked about, what we call Panchamrit, that India will increase its non-fossil fuel energy capacity by 500 gigawatt by 2030. Second, it will meet its 50% energy requirement from renewable energy sources by 2030. So about next 8 years from now, 50% of our sources will come from renewable energy sources. And that's something that we have pledged. It will also reduce the total projection of carbon emission by 1 billion tons from now to 2030. By 2030, again, India will reduce the carbon intensity of economy by 45%. From a previous target of 35%. These are all voluntary pledges that we have taken. And we said that by 2070, we'll achieve the target of net zero. And I will explain that to you all, how is going to happen and what are the issues. But what is actually net zero, right? It's very, there are a lot of buzzwords around net zero, but just to very simply tell you, so we have these measures to lower emissions. That is, for example, investing in green technology. So that is, and then measures to remove emissions. So one is that when the overall the carbon emission that we take, how much we are taking out from the atmosphere, that is net zero. Some net what we call the zero sum game. So we are, if you're producing 100 million tons of carbon, and if you have 100 measures through which we actually sink in carbon. How do we sink in carbon? By, say, if we're planting more trees, if we're protecting more water bodies, they'll sink in the carbon. So that means we will go net zero, and that is what the emission that we will be having, and the measures to remove emissions, which will be the equation will be zero, because that is what we are solving. And also what are the if we invest a lot in the green technology, for example, all that will reduce our emissions. So one is that you reduce your emission. So at the moment, if the emission is peaking like this, you reduce it, and you increase your measures of mitigation. So these 2 points will balance out into net. So that's simple. What is net zero? Okay, and we said that by 2070 we should be producing less carbon than we take out to the atmosphere. That's very simple. So that's the pledge that we have taken, right? But what are the issues? There are a lot of issues around that. India is the 3rd largest polluter, but per capita carbon emission is the lowest, one of the lowest in the world that India has. So just because the size of the economy and the number of people that are staying here, we may be the 3rd largest polluters in terms of carbon emission, but in terms of per capita, we are much lower. And that's the whole issue that we have. So so our target is to reach net zero by 2070, and we should cut emission by half by 2050. What is also happening in the global north, the industrialized north, has also said that we will cut emission by half by 2030 and net zero by 2050. But that is not, when we're looking at the data, doesn't show that the industrialized north will be, global north will be cutting them by 2030. And that's the whole issue, that you are telling us to do it, but what about your own pledges that you have taken and you have not delivered on that one? So that's one issue India is raising, rightly so. India is asking for more carbon space than the global south, and that is what the major point of contention has been in COP26 as well, and I'm sure this is going to be continuing. The status of climate finance also, because most of the problem, today's climate change problem, is not because of we are emitting, but is because the industrialized north, the global north, has been emitting, and that's why we have today's climate change. So what India and the other global south countries have said, that you better pay us, because this is the damage that we are causing without being contributing to the whole process. And then the global north, the countries, the Paris Agreement has actually come together and said we will collectively put about $100 billion per year for the mitigation purpose or adaptation purpose. But we have only, received about 12 million. So the grants and most of the things are coming as aid than grants, and that's the problem that we are facing. And by the time we are seeing that by 2015 this figure needs to double, or if not triple. So that's the whole part, is that the global north, who has tried to tell us that, okay, we will give you money to fix the environment, they themselves are not paying up. And that's the whole issue, which is always a point of contentions. And I'm sure COP27 will also be looking at it. What has been the suggestive roadmap for India? And that's the thing. But if we are saying that by 2070, we will be going net zero, how does it happen? And that's the whole part. I'll just show you which sector is the largest contributor to carbon. And if you find about 72% of the emission actually happens in the energy. This is a global figure. So 73% is actually in the energy spaces. Very few, about 18% is in the agriculture, about 5% in the industry, and 3.2% is in the waste thing. So this is how. So major problem is about energy use, either industry or transport, or you are looking at it, energy use in buildings. And these are the major issues that we need to be discussing on. So if we want to reduce our carbon footprints, or make it our lives, to comply with what we call the net zero thing, we need to work a lot on the energy sectors, and that is something that has been talked about, right? I will just skip this, but we have taken certain policy measures, like you have Ujjwala Yojana, the solar global solar alliance that we've been working on. A lot of things have come up as policies, and India is pretty much ahead in terms of policies which we have. We'll come to what happens in implementation, but then we look at it. So what are the, I will just put up 5 points which is needed for what we call the low carbon development, and then I'll very quickly go through it. I know I'm just, so 5 more minutes and I'll close it. The first point is we need to decarbonize power, energy, and the transport sector. That's the first one that we have. We have about 90% of our emissions actually from these sectors, and decarbonizing this should be our first priority. That's number one. Number two is cities must be climate efficient and resilient. And as you know, that the cities, as I said earlier, the number of people going to be staying in cities is almost going to be 50% by 2050 and 45% by 2040. And that's the projection that we are seeing. That means large number of people are at much greater risk because cities are under huge stress in terms of climate change. Slowly, we have to move towards what we call the electric transport, from individual transport to public transport, the last mile connectivity, wherever metros are operational, looking at energy efficient building. And I'll give you one example. In Hyderabad, I drive to my office and I see big buildings are coming up, all glass building, 24-story building full of glass. Now imagine that is in Manhattan, that is understandable. Anybody is living in Germany or Frankfurt, this is understandable because a colder climate, they need to have a system where they can check with the colder air that comes in. But imagine this in the heart of Hyderabad, which is a warm climate. I always say that this is the 3 seasons, hot, hot, or hottest. So that's the part that you have. The climate is like that. And in that climate situation, you have a building which is full of glass. Imagine the kind of air conditioning energy usage which will be needed to just cool down the entire building year round, right? Because this is the way buildings are now being made. We are just aping the West without being understanding that what is the situation that we are living in, and that's where energy efficient building must be there. And that's the point number 2 I'm trying to make. Coming to point number 3, we also need to create skills and institutional change that we have. Skills, the green skill development process, training, capacity building, because not many city managers know about how to look into. And then Badri knows that I've been talking a lot about Mumbai's climate action plan. They're a very good plan, but in terms of implementation, where's the capacity? Who is going to be implementing? Well, how is that happening? That's another part that we have looking at. Looking at how businesses strategies can help in changing the systems and at least working towards solutions, because I think government has limited capacity and businesses must come in to do that. This is what we got. Last couple of points of that, the ray of hope also, because all these I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture, because it's what it is now, right? Which is what IPCC report are telling us, what they're calling a code red for humanities, that is there. But not everything is lost. I think we do have some window opportunities, about 2 decades that we have still in our hand to save our planet for the future, especially for our future generation. We also have technology, we have capacity, we have expertise, not that we have lost everything. That's something. So we need to provide certain immediate action, and I'll try and focus next 2-3 minute slides into what could that be. And I'm calling this as climate resilient pathways. Climate resilient pathways, if you look at this figure, this is the present situation where we are, and this is where the 1.5 degree pathways are there. And if you look at the warmer world, that means if you go down and that the pathways are 2 degree warmer world, that means vulnerabilities of systems will be increasing. We are at much higher risk. If we still protect our 1.5 degree, it's still going to be looking at the situation in a much better situation. And if you find that there are different pathways that you can take, and that is all in our hand, I don't think there's anybody else has to do that. Our politicians, our people, you and I working together, that is what we have to be looking at it. So if you see the past choices that has led to this budget situation that we are in now, but from here, even if we achieve, for example, sustainable development goals in next 8 years that we have now, 2030 is the goal, we will be actually looking at which pathways are we taking, and the opportunity is of higher climate resilient pathways are still available to us. And this is the dotted line that we have. That means we'll also be achieving the SDG goal and the pathways which is climate resilient for most of us. Yeah, I will try and I'll just end my presentation here with the last slide that we have, that this is the two things that we have, this risk scenario, and this is something which is the climate resilient pathways, which is trying to see that you have the equity, you have better livelihood, and you have better ecosystem for us to perform. So this is where I will end. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll be very happy to take any questions. Thank you. Over to you, Badri.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. There are questions that have already started coming into the chat window, so I'm going to start posing one by one. Apologies to the listeners, to the audience. I may not be able to pass on the mic to you because we realize that often because of technical issues we end up losing some time. So I will read out your question for sure, and this way it actually gives us an opportunity to add maybe an additional question or two, because we won't lose time because of bad network. So the first one is, I actually combine the two questions. Can you briefly explain what is RCP and how is it used? And the second one is, can states achieve net zero status through subnational push much before India? If yes, could you tell us a rough timeline and how that's possible? After that, there's Kalyani, and then there's Dolly.
Yeah. So there was small breakers. Yeah, the small break in the. Can you just repeat the question, please?
Hello? Yeah. Of course. So
can you just repeat the question, please?
Sure. Can you hear me now? The first one was, can you briefly explain what is RCP and how is it used? And the follow-up question was, can states achieve net zero status through subnational push before India's target?
Okay, that's very good question. Both the questions are very good. The RCP is representative concentration pathways. These are actually the scientists have actually taken a lot of data to make this pathways, and the pathways are based on certain policies and also certain assumptions based on the the way we look at the pathways in terms of the modeling that we have. So there are 4 pathways which has been largely operational. So RCP 4.5, then RCP 8.5. These are pathways which is we call also shared socioeconomic pathways, which combines the climate data and the what we call the social policies or the climate policies that we have. And if you take one pathway, what is the at the end product that will be, and if you take another pathway. So RCP 8.5, for example, is a pathway where you do not cooperate with any of the countries. This is the present way in which we are doing. We are not cooperating. The countries are not coming in terms to climate realities, and they are not signing agreement to reduce our emissions. So we actually reaching almost what we call the RCP 8.5. That is the worst case scenario. The best case scenario where everybody cooperates and then they are able to come together and save our climate. That means the global north will reduce its emission, global south will work on adaptation. This is what's a good scenario, which is also not happening. So we are somewhere in between, and that is what these concentration pathways, representative concentration pathways are telling us. So these are tools for the policymakers to take certain decisions. It's a scientific term, very nuanced because these are all based on the climate modeling that we have, but it gives you a broad overview of where we are at this moment and what is the pathway that we can take. That's number one. Coming to the net zero and especially the states, that's a very good question. Whoever has asked this question, because that shows the level of understanding we have of net zero, and very nice that we have been asking this question. What I have been telling that we have pledged that by 2070 we will come to what we call the net zero. See, 70% of globally, 72% of the emission actually happens in the urban spaces, which are the bigger cities: Mumbai, Kolkata, Delhi, Chennai, right? So these are also cities or states which has larger emissions. So states, for example, Bihar versus state like Maharashtra have a very different trajectories of development and also different carbon emission pathways. So I am telling that the state specific targets needs to be fixed. And that is the next level, which is needed for all of us. If we really want to achieve, we have to break it down to the common denominator that we have, and that is state is the second level that we have to really work on. And I would say go to the second level, looking at the district level climate modeling and the emission pathways, and how do we look at it? That's the two questions. Over to you, Vikesh.
Thanks, Dr. Prakash. Kalyani, over to you. If you can unmute yourself and quickly ask your question.
Thank you, Brikesh. I'm calling from Visakhapatnam. So I'm working on this project since 2014-15 onwards into education sector, but I still found there is lack of some support from the government, and even people still has to get the awareness. So I'm implementing a lot of real action projects in the education sector. So I'm very much interested in this project delivered by the professor. So if any chance to collaborate with this project from Indian schools, colleges, or even from outside of India, I can bring students so that jointly they can collaborate and work on this project. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kalyani. I'll just share my email ID and we'll be very happy to guide, if not collaborate. I'm not sure how will I be able to help, but definitely we can talk over phone and or email, we can take it forward. So I'll share my email ID. Please do connect with me.
Thank you.
But
Thank you
just
so
coming,
much.
just coming to the sector, especially the education sector, I would say that there's this green, mission, skill mission that is there, which is actually looking at green skill development program, where one can look into the government programs and then work together with the government. I guess that will be very, very good, especially looking at the skills which needs to be developed, especially for young children.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. Next question is from Badri, actually, that if you can briefly touch upon the heat island effect and sea level rise across Indian cities. What should cities do under their respective climate action plan? And after that, Ajay, you can ask your question. You're next up in line. Sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Badri. And I know that this was a point that that needs to be discussed. That because of positive time, I have to just skip it. But I'll just, just to inform people who do not know that Mumbai has come up with its own climate action plan, city level climate action plan, which is the first in the country, and it's part of the C40 cities that they have been working on. It's quite good because the plan, what I would say, ticks all the boxes in terms of the major issues at hand. The problem with this plan actually is the implementation. And I think the institutional structure through which it will be implemented is something that they're still been working on, and that's where the major problem lies. So I would actually say that if we really have to go by, I have been telling that we need to restructure our Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Climate change is one of the 12 divisions within the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So climate change is an added component there. But the people who are so-called manning, because there are mostly men who are there, are these places are actually not climate scientists. They are mostly come from the Indian Forest Service. I have huge regard for foresters, but that's only one factor. Today's climate change is actually about much more interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary subject. People who are working scientists need to have the lateral entry. So this structure in which we are delivering services for climate change is quite flawed in India, I would say. So we need to restructure the institutional ways in which we will deliver it. And that is where the city's action plan has to be integrated with the state action plan. And the state has to represent, has to report to the center, the ministry that you have. So that is what I'm saying, that I'm arguing for a separate ministry for climate change, which will take care of these issues on hand. And that's where lateral entry of scientists, people working, and even journalists, because journalists, I think, has quite a knack of, and the environment journalists that we've been working. So we need to have these people, because climate change is not only about the problem of bureaucrats, or can be solved by the bureaucrats. It has to have larger vision for that one. Coming to the last point of the climate action plan, I think most of the state climate action plan also has been quite flawed. It's a cut-paste problem that has happened. Most of that plan are made by sitting in AC conditions in Delhi than going to the field. There's not much of a bottom-up approaches which is happening. So these are my critique to the State Climate Action Plan. We need to get real go forward.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. We have 4 more questions lined up. Dolly, you also have a question, but I'm assuming it's on similar lines as Kalyani. So Professor, where you asked about how to collaborate on these projects. So Professor Prakash has shared his email. You can get in touch with him. Next up, Ajay, if you can quickly ask your question. And after that, there's Shivangi, Leena, and Yogesh. Ajay, next up, it's you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prakash. So my question is on the lines of the cities, as I pick is a big part. So how do you think well informed are our city leaders, and how much power do they have in terms of decision making to take these actions forward? And what is that gap, and any opinion how can we as civil society help fix this gap?
That's a very good question that you asked, Ajay. See, at the city level, there are 2 things that is very important. One is the institutional structure for delivery. As I am saying that at the country level also, we have the system which I'm questioning, and the same problem is at the state level. And climate change is now touching all the other sectors. You look at, say, road and transport, you look at energy, you look at health, you look at education, even, Kalyani was talking about education, all that is there. So every sector must be, climate proof, if I would say. So for example, infrastructure, in Mumbai, a city like Mumbai, the infrastructure has to be climate resilient. And when you're making bridges, which is climate resilient, or if you're looking at the drainage supply systems, which has to be climate resilient, it has to, comply to say 300 or 400 millimeters of rainfall that may happen in 24 hours. So Mumbai has to be ready for tomorrow's climate change in that sense. That means you have to really cough up your double or triple or sometimes even more money into putting into your development plan. And that is where the major problem lies, that city like Mumbai has a lot of money, but other cities may not have money to do that. And most of the time what is happening is that our actions are actually reactions, is not actions, right? So we have knee-jerk solutions. If the flood happens today, tomorrow there will be huge and cry over television, and then things will happen next day, 2-3 days, and then after that things goes to normal. It's back to normal. So unless we fix the problem, where it exists, we will not be able to do that. And I think the first level is to work out on the institutional structure. I would say that climate change should be part of the Chief Minister's office, which is actually a coordination office that coordinates with the entire ministries and get the things on ground and reported back to the Chief Minister. If we don't do that at the state level, it will be very difficult for us to take it forward.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. So we have just 10 more minutes and we have 3 questions lined up. Next one is from Shivangi on electric vehicles. Shivangi, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, sir. Thank you. I'll just quickly read out my question. So in your opinion, do you think that electric mobility will help in dealing more with energy security issue, or will it actually be able to help India in achieving net zero targets? Because if we see electricity generation in India, it is still largely dependent on fossil fuels. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Shivangi, you asked, because if looking at again climate change action plan for Mumbai, for example, it is still having a gap of 30% because the city's action plan is also dependent on the larger India's action plan, and India's action plan, in a sense, India's coal, if the energy sector is actually fed by by coal or fossil fuel energy that's coming in, even if you want to make your city net zero, you will still have the gap because the larger production happens somewhere else. So this linkages has to be very, very sharp. Coming to your question is that, the electric mobility will help in dealing more with energy security issue. I think that we do have the International Solar Alliance, but the last mile connectivity, again, for example, I would say that each household, wherever possible, can generate electricity, because we are, a country which sunshine about 220 days in average in India. All of us, you and I, can do it, but the way in which bureaucracy functions or it doesn't reach out to us in the sense, right? So if there's an agency, for example, which facilitates the whole thing, comes through my home, like, you know, opening a bank account, ICICI Bank comes, and then with your one step with Aadhaar card, they you know, your account is operated. Something like that. If make it easy for people to work on it, I would say that then that will help us in achieving what we call the energy security for us thing, which is non-fossil fuel based, right? And that is number one. So at this moment, large portion of this is coming from large solar park, but it can also be decentralized to household level. Even if you produce say 10 megawatt or 10 unit of electricity, even that is something that you're contributing to the grid. So that I would say that is there. But your electric mobility will not independently fix the net zero issue. It has to be part of what we call the larger game plan, and that is something which is missing at this moment. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prakash. Next up, Leena, please go ahead and ask your question.
I just wanted to ask whether there is any, are there any trainings or capacity building programs for the city leaders to implement these programs? Because most of the times, they are clueless. I mean, they just don't understand the language that is written over there, or they probably is not competent enough. And also, how can citizens be engaged in terms of implementing the programs?
Okay. So you have two questions, Leena, and I think the first question, you're hitting the nail, the whole part of the capacity. That's very important. In fact, I'm working with World Resources Institute and the National Institute of Urban Affairs. We are designing a course for the city managers to train them on very basics of climate change and how do we look into climate change issues. This is the work that I'm doing now presently. Next 3 to 4 months, we'll be launching a program which is both synchronous and asynchronous program for city managers. So that's, Leena, that is the information, and I'll definitely, through Badri and Brikesh, I will send it out to everybody so that if you're interested, you can also join online programs and all that. That's number one. So looking at the other question that you have, I think that is we still a long way to go in terms of especially what do you and I can do. And I'll just keep focus on one part. I think one of the major issues also about waste management in India. It contributes about 3% of the in terms of the global contribution to global greenhouse gases, but the problem is much large. What we don't do is segregate the waste at home. What I do personally, that in my home we have a two system, and this is not a government regulation. I do it myself. About 70 to 80% of my waste actually is organic waste coming from the kitchen, and that gets into a small startup has come up in Hyderabad which has about 4 buckets, and they all interlinked bucket, which you put it in the first bucket, and then slowly in 1 month once first bucket will fill up, and then you go to second bucket, like that. Very interesting, very simple technology. What I'm saying is that you and I can do this at our own thing, but we also need to have regulation. Municipal bodies must have regulation that you must segregate waste at home. You must recycle your waste for the gardens and all that. I have enough manure which I can actually give it free to my friends and families and all that stuff. All of us can produce that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. Next up, Yogesh sir, and I think we will have time for one more question which Munna has asked. Munna, that's a very powerful question. So Yogesh sir, quickly ask your question, and then we'll go to Munna and close the session today. Yogesh sir.
Thank you, Brikesh. Thanks. My question was that when we have seen that the Mumbai group have raised the question about the RA forest. There was a fear that they will cut, but now we are looking that much of the seashore of the Mumbai or close to the Marine Drive is filling with the debris. So what will the impact of this debris that will fill the sea on the small islands? So is there the fear? That is my question, sir. And if there is a fear, why we are doing that? Why that the Mumbaikas are not coming to oppose this? That is the question.
Yogesh, see, I have been telling this for a long time that Mumbai has very systematically killing its mangrove forest, for example. And this is not something which is happening out of the blue. It is a planned process through which you just kill those things just because you have more and more greed for land, and that's why you're filling up these things. So this is happening at a very systematic plan where the local corporator politicians, you have the bureaucracy hand in gloves with them, and you have the large interest of the builders lobby which is there, right? So this is a nexus. Climate change is a small part because they just don't care. Nobody cares about that climate change or otherwise, right? So what we care is about a couple of billions that you may make by filling up certain areas, and then tomorrow, if the climate change strikes, if there's a heavy rainfall, you will say that, oh, I'm getting flooded, and you pay for that one. So that's the whole part of it. So this is done with a very, very what I would say intelligent mind, and very difficult to combat. But I think the good thing that we can do, Yogesh, is to keep writing about it. I keep talking about it. I keep writing about it. That's the only way. And Mumbai is half of the Mumbai is dug up anyway. Wherever you go, you will not find a space where you can actually move faster. So God knows what happens to that place anyway.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Prakash. And thank you, Yogesh sir. That was a fantastic question. Last question. The stage is yours, Munna, and then we will close. Munna, you can unmute and ask your question.
शुक्रिया सर, बहुत सारी बातें समझाने के लिए। मैं बिहार से हूँ और बिहार में मैं ऐसी जगह से आता हूँ जहाँ बाढ़ गर्मी में भी आ जाता है और मतलब 12 महीने में कभी भी आ सकता है। तो मेरा सवाल ये था, हमारा एक समाज पहले वाला था जो नदियों के साथ जीना जानता था, रहना जानता था, और उसकी पूरी दुनिया नदियों के साथ रहती थी, मतलब बनी हुई थी। तो मैंने देखा है कि पिछले कई सालों में वो सारी चीजें खत्म हुई है। वो लगातार क्लाइमेट का संकट हो या सरकार के जो पॉलिसीज है उन सारी चीजों को एड्रेस नहीं करती है। तो मैं बस एक सटीक सा सवाल था कि क्या आईपीसीसी ये जो लोक ज्ञान है, इंडिजिनस अप्रोच है लोगों का, क्या उसको एड्रेस करती है? क्योंकि हमारा जो पॉलिसी मेकर है या जो हमारा विज्ञान है जिसमें आईएएस ऑफिसर्स हैं, पॉलिसी मेकर है, वो तो नहीं मानते हैं उसको। तो मैं बस यही सटीक सवाल था मेरे से सर।
हाँ, बहुत अच्छा आपका सवाल है मुन्ना जी। एंड मैंने तो बिहार में काम किया है, खासकर पश्चिम चंपारण में या पूर्वी चंपारण में काम किया है, और मैं जानता हूँ बहुत मतलब अंदर से देखा है हमने कि लोगों के पास जो ज्ञान है और संज्ञान है उनका है, उसका बहुत इम्पैक्ट है उनकी खुद की लाइफ में। मैं आपको 2-3 बातें बताऊंगा यहाँ पे। पहली बार तो ये आईपीसीसी की जो एक रिपोर्ट थी, फर्स्ट वाली, इसके 6 असेसमेंट रिपोर्ट के पहले, जो स्पेशल रिपोर्ट ऑन ओशंस एंड क्लाइस्फियर, जिसमें मैं उसका पार्ट था, हमने उसमें पहली बार हमने इंटरनल एडवोकेसी करके ये जो लोकल नॉलेज और इंडिजिनस नॉलेज है उसको हमने असेसमेंट में डाला था। पहले जो था, ये जो पूरा विज्ञान था वो क्लासिकल साइंस के हिसाब से था कि जो भी पब्लिश पेपर हो गए, जो विज्ञान टाइप का चीज है वही आएगा। लेकिन लोकल जो नॉलेज है, लोकल जो रिसोर्सेज हैं, लोग जैसे लिव्ड इन एक्सपीरियंस है उनका, वो कैसे उससे पार पाते हैं एडेप्टेशन के लिए, वो उसमें नहीं आ रहा था। तो इस बार पहली बार हमने उस रिपोर्ट में उसका असेसमेंट किया, और अब जो 6 असेसमेंट रिपोर्ट आई है उसमें भी ये अभी असेसमेंट का भाग है, और उसमें बहुत सारा चीजें इसमें मैं खुद कंट्रीब्यूट किया। आपको एक बात बताऊंगा मुन्ना जी, जो आपने नॉर्थ बिहार में, जैसे कि अगर नेपाल में बारिश होती है तो बारिश का पानी जब नदी में, गंडक या कोसी नदी में आता है, तो बारिश का पानी का कलर चेंज हो जाता है ना, जबकि ऊपर बारिश होती है। तो लोगों को पता चल जाता है तुरंत से कि बारिश लगता है नेपाल में हो रही है, और क्योंकि पानी का कलर देखते हुए। 1-2 चीजें, जैसे छोटी सी एक काली जो चींटी होती है, वो बहुत बड़ी तादाद में बारिश का पानी आने के पहले निकलने, अपने दिल से निकलना चालू कर देती है, वो भागने लगती हैं। उनको देख के लोगों को पता चल जाता है कि हमारे यहाँ बाढ़ की स्थिति, डूब की स्थिति आने वाली है, और बहुत हेवी बारिश होगी, इसके हिसाब से उनका अनुमान रहता है। तो बहुत छोटी छोटी जो चीजें जो ऑब्जर्वेशन से आई हैं, जिसको हमने डॉक्यूमेंट किया है और हमने आईपीसीसी रिपोर्ट में डाला है अपने हिसाब से। और भी बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, जैसे कि जो खल है, मन है, जो पूरे नॉर्थ बिहार में है, या अहर पाइन सिस्टम था, विच वाज अ ब्यूटीफुल सिस्टम ऑफ वाटर मैनेजमेंट। इमेजिन Vikesh, one water is to fall in the Himalayan region, that will travel 500 kilometers as low a point as Gaya, and it will irrigate the entire region. Imagine that is the sophisticated system that we had in Bihar, which was very beautifully linked with the, and it will fill in as the water will flow without any energy, external energy sources. It will flow and will fill in all the tanks and the small and big tanks all on the way. They were all intricate system, beautiful system, which was designed 500,000 years before, has totally declined now, and not even nobody is even planners are taking. So Munna ji is right, is that the policymakers are not taking these things, but we need to have just to make at least the right noise. And over to you. Thank you so much. I know the time is up. This is a beautiful topic for discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. And really, I mean, for the last 2.5 years, there's a lot of, we've been living our world in little tiny boxes on the computer, and there is a webinar and Zoom fatigue. But I would be happy to say that this has been one of the conversations where you have been extremely candid, you have been extremely honest, you have not held back any punches, and you have said things like as they are. So thank you very much for that. I'd just like to pass it on to Badri and Karuna ma'am to just quickly give a vote of thanks, and then maybe we can close this session. And for everybody else, we will be uploading this, we'll be sharing the presentation, like people who are a part of the Clean Air Collective, this will be uploaded on the forum, and others, if they want access to the presentation, we'll be happy to email it to you. Badri and then Karuna ma'am.
Thank you, Brikesh. Thank you, Dr. Prakash, for as always being the way that you put out all these important information for everyone today. Ajay ji, is Karuna ma'am there? Would you like to go ahead from your end?
So Karuna ma'am has gone for another event. So on behalf of Earth Day, I really thank Dr. Prakash and Asar team for taking this up. I think this was a fantastic session, a lot of things to learn, and just gives me a view of so much that we don't know and so much needs to be done. So this is a perfect dose of inspiration that we need for Earth Day to carry this movement forward. So thank you so much for this session.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure actually to speak to such interested group of individuals. So thank you so much for all your time, and thank you, Badri, for pushing me to come here and speak to all of you. Thank you. I'll do it much more often. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Prakash.
everyone.
Have a good day. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.